Okay, thanks for coming, you guys. We're going to go through chapter 9 today. It's a nice little chapter. It's got another quantitative piece that you guys will like being accountants because that's a nice question to solve. And we're going to move on and talk about efficient contracting theory and accounting. And it's an analysis of conflict. Sorry, my little windows are blocking some of what I'm trying to read. Okay. So we're going to look at game and agency theory. And some of the basic game theory was done in chapter 8, but I'll go over the part we need to do for this chapter. And we're going to look at agency theory. So agency theory is a critical theory. It's looking, and we look at it in two different ways. The first way is the owner and manager contract. So if you're the owner of a business, let's say you start your own business, maybe you're doing it all yourself. As it grows, you have to bring on people. So and I'm talking in terms right now of a small business. So you have to bring on maybe a manager, and maybe you can't be at your business all the time. So we're looking at the conflict there between the manager and how they act. They could act in their own best interests, or they can act in the best interest of you, the owner. Of course, the same thing happens when you're a shareholder, one of many. You've got your executive team working, and they don't always act in the best interest of the company or the long-term shareholders. And I know we talked before about this, shareholders that just want to get in, get a price increase, and get out again. But we're talking more in the long-term interest. So we're going to talk a bit about why they don't act in the best interest of the company, and how we can add net income to measure manager performance that gives the best scenario we can get, which is actually the second best scenario, but it's where both parties, the owner and the manager, actually receive good utility levels. So utility, you might remember from way back from chapter 2 or 3, that was our kind of level of happiness, or what you get out of working or running a business or whatever. Then we're going to look at agency theory again, two parties, the lender. So you're a bank, you lend a corporation money, and the manager is in charge of taking care of that corporation. Should they act in their interest or the corporation's interest or in yours? And you'll see they don't always act this way. So there's things put in place to strengthen the motivation for the manager to work in the lender's best terms. Okay, game theory. There's a high degree of uncertainty and information asymmetry between the parties. Players maximize their own utility. So, in economics, one of your economics classes, you may have done the prisoner's dilemma. So if you've done that, then, sorry, I just want to check that I was recording. Yeah. If you've done the prisoner's dilemma, then that's an example of this. So if you've got two prisoners, okay, let's say we've arrested two people. And the way it works out is that we have them both in a separate room. You know, those interrogation rooms. I watch way too much true crime stuff. And each one can either confess or they can just be quiet and not say anything. Have any of you done this one in class?
Yeah, I've seen it a few times before.
Okay, yeah. So if prisoner A is quiet and prisoner B is quiet, they both get 6 months. But if one talks and the other one doesn't, the person who talks doesn't get anything, but the other person does. If they both talk, they both get 5 years. So ultimately, the way it works is if you look at their levels of utility for those, you would end up with both of them talking with getting 5 years each, which is what's called a Nash equilibrium. And I'll give you an example of that with numbers and stuff in just a sec. So the thing is, players are going to maximize their own utility. They have to take into account random state realization. So what are the options and what could happen? And they have to guess at the actions of the other players. So games can be cooperative or non-cooperative. And a cooperative game involves some kind of binding agreement. So one thing I want to ask you, whoops, sorry guys. Some kind of binding agreement. Now, it could be legal or it might not. Imagine you were all involved in a drug cartel. Sometimes this chapter with the prisoners and drug cartels really kind of makes us sound like we're talking about something else. But anyway, so you're in a drug cartel. Are there any legal things holding you there or forcing you to do what they ask? If you've joined?
No.
This is from my vast experience with drug cartels, which is zero, except for movies, you guys. So
If you're in a country where they're illegal? No.
No. So there's no legal binding agreement, but is there any other kind of binding agreement? Possibly.
Yep. Threat of death.
That's huge, the threat of death. Okay. So think of a drug cartel. And non-legal binding agreements. And actually, there is one prof in Canada. I can't remember his name offhand. He spoke at a conference. He started research on accounting for the accounting systems behind some of these illegal operations further south, like South America, Mexico, that kind of thing. And he's still in the early stages of his research, but it was quite interesting what he was trying to do.
Also, some interesting non-legal agreements. If you look into the mafia, if your whole family's in the mafia and you leave, you get completely cut off from your whole clan, bloodline support system.
Okay. Yeah, so those are good examples of non-legal, well, non-contractual, I guess, written down binding agreements. That's good. Can anyone think of anything else? Now, depending in corporations, and you're looking at the upper executive class, if you don't do what they want, there is a possibility of you getting fired and then not rehired, depending on your industry and what it's like, right? So that isn't quite as dramatic as these two examples, but there can be pressure, right? Even if you're working at your job and they say, can you do this for accounting? And you will get asked, everybody gets asked in their accounting careers to do something like that usually. Oh, can you just do this? Can you make this adjustment just so it looks better? And if you say no, you could lose your job, right? So, same kind of idea. With this chapter and most of this course, we're actually talking though about upper level executives. And the way we can remunerate them so that we can get them thinking not only short term but long term. Okay. So games often result in a Nash equilibrium. And I'm going to go over that right now. Stop sharing this. I'm just going to need some plain paper, so that's why. Okay, so we're going to be looking at a Nash equilibrium here. As soon as I get my little pen. And it's actually from example 8.1 on page 336. Example 8.1. I'm sorry, I don't have the page number. But I'll write it out for you. Okay, here we have a manager, and over here we have an investor. And we're going to look at what kind of utility they get out of doing different things. So a manager can either be honest with their reporting, or they can distort. And the investor can either buy the stocks or not buy. Refuse to buy. So their utilities are 60 for the investor, 40 for the manager. And these are given. And the way they come up with these utilities, obviously, everybody doesn't sit there and just go, let me think, what is my utility? They've done different experiments, changed different factors, see how people make decisions, and then assign the utilities based on that. So we could get 20. I'm just taking this from the example. So the purple number is utilities. Okay. So here we have 35, 5, 20 for the manager, 30, 30 for the manager. Okay, so I'll kind of show you how this works. So the first thing, let's look at the manager being honest. So if the manager decides to be honest, these are the utilities for the investor. If the manager decides to be honest here, Which will the investor likely do? Buy or refuse to buy? Given the utility, what do they want to do?
Buy.
They want to buy, right? So they want to do that. And they wouldn't want to do this. Now, if the manager distorted the information and the investor knew, which would they want to do?
Not buy.
Not buy, right? So this would be good. That's not a good idea. Okay, so then we look at the investor and what they do. If the investor is going to buy, which would the manager have preferred to do?
Distort.
Distort. Why? Because they're getting 80. So they don't want to do that. They don't want to be honest. Because if you knew the investors were going to buy, you could distort it, make your information better, end up with a bigger bonus. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Now, if the investor was going to refuse to buy, which would the manager do? Distort.
Also distort.
Yeah, also distort. Because he's got a higher or she's got a higher utility here. So wouldn't do that. So what happens then is this Nash equilibrium comes to, I'm just going to find a different color. Ends up here. Notice all of these choices have X's except for this one. So we end up with the Nash equilibrium. And it's neither party here reaches maximum utility. So it's not the best choice. However, so that's where it would naturally end up. And if you were doing the prison, if you've done the prisoner's dilemma, that's where you kind of end up. All of you, both of you getting 6 years because you both talk. But if they pick this solution, that's the best solution for both. The highest possible for both of them. It's the cooperative solution. So the investor's going to buy, the manager's going to be honest, and things should work out for both of them. So that's what I'm talking about when they talk about the Nash equilibrium. It's not the best one, but that's where you'd naturally end up. So what we're going to talk about kind of for the rest is ways to influence a more cooperative solution. Any questions on that? Okay. I'm just going to stop sharing this. And let's go back to our PowerPoint. Okay. So that Nash equilibrium then was example 8.1 in your text. Okay, hang on, Sandra. I'll just pop back. Sorry, I'm so slow at this, guys. This is. Okay, so this one is where they'll end up, because as we analyze each of these, every option here had an X. So that means either the manager or the investor isn't going to go that way. Ultimately, they'll automatically end up here. Not always. And I've run through prisoner's dilemmas before, which is the same setup as this. And sometimes they end up actually in the cooperative solution. And I think partly it's because accounting students are generally more risk averse than they might have done on a broader scope for their experiments. So this isn't the best. This is where they actually end up. This would have been a better choice, but they didn't trust each other. So they ended up here. Does that make sense, Sandra?
Accounting students are more risk averse?
Yes.
The more risk averse answer leads you to the double check marks. If I'm the investor and I choose buy, my risk is going to 20.
I was talking about the prisoner's dilemma one. Because in a prisoner's dilemma, this would be prisoner A, and this would be prisoner B, and one would be talk or quiet, stay quiet, and some would be talk. And so they both end up being quiet and getting a shorter sentence, which you don't expect. You expect them both to talk, because based on the utility. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. So less risk averse would be more likely to stay quiet.
I'm going to have to think about that some more.
Like if you look at it with the numbers, I risk getting a 20 if I buy in this case, or I can guarantee myself 35.
Oh, I totally see with this example.
Yeah, it is different when the both talking can lead to 5 years as opposed to the lighter sentences.
And being quiet. I guess I think of more risk averseness, averse to all negative things.
But with the quiet, you can still end up with the 5 years if he talks.
Yes, you can, and that's because there's no trust, which is what you expect. You expect more of this. You definitely don't expect the first best scenario.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how many times I've done that. Of course, I haven't done it with a non-accounting class, so but most of the studies are, because they're usually done in economics or finance or something.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, yes, that's a good point. I'm going to have to think about how maybe I'm defining risk averse different to what the typical definition is. Thanks. That's a good point. And Sandra, did that make sense now? Before I threw in the prisoners. Oh, perfect. Okay. Okay. Okay, so that's a national. So a non-cooperative manager-investor game. Investors want relevant, reliable information to make decisions. Managers, on the other hand, if they want to raise capital, they may omit liabilities. They may hide accounting policies to maintain confidentiality from competition. For example, the amount of bad debt. Warranty info. Provisions for environmental costs. And legal liabilities. So that is one of the problems in accounting statements trying to be absolutely 100% transparent, is you're also dealing with a situation where there's competitors. And so you can't give all your information and all your plans and everything to the investors. It wouldn't be feasible, and it would put you at a disadvantage. Managers also want to present information to make themselves look good. Get a good bonus. So there's definitely factors on managers against being totally transparent and honest. Now, some of it doesn't have to be on their own self-interest. It could be in the interest of the firm. And last chapter, we talked about contractual costs, how every business is made up of a bunch of little contracts with everybody, with your employees, with your suppliers, with your customers, and so on. And in that basis, this actually isn't a bad thing, right? This is going to reduce your contract costs. Now, where we draw the line, I'm certainly not saying do everything you can to reduce those contract costs. You have to still stay within the accounting regulations and stay fair and that kind of stuff. But the key thing is that you've got these pressures there, not only for you as a manager, but for the firm. The other thing, to make themselves look good, and the firm, they need to meet analysts' expectations. So way back in the early chapters, we showed that if a firm doesn't meet analyst expectations, for example, for EPS, then the share price will drop for the firm. And if they do better, the share price generally rises. That's because up to the date of the actual announcement of actual EPS, investors' expectations, based on what the analyst has said and all the other stuff that's been happening, has been built into the share price, because investors have bought and sold all the way leading up to the actual announcement. The actual announcement comes and it's not what it was supposed to be, then share price will drop. If it's higher, it'll go up, generally. Okay. Oh, so I did the Nash equilibrium. So this was, got so excited about doing it. That's the non-cooperative game that we did on the extra piece of paper. It's not satisfactory. Neither party is reaching maximum utility. So one way we can solve this is we need some kind of agreement to keep the managers honest or to verify what they produce. So, do we have that in Canada, the US? Yeah, they have financial statements that have to be audited. So, Financial statements have to be audited. Okay, another solution could be severe penalties. And technically there are, especially in the US, investors will sue. But the SEC and here the Toronto Stock Exchange have penalties. Now, unfortunately, these two bodies, especially when we talk more about the SEC, ever since, well, SOX came in because of all the, sorry, I'm losing my words, guys. SOX came in because of the unethical representation of financial information. The SEC in particular has gone quite far behind in trying to prosecute and determine whether a firm is legally liable for misstating financial statements to mislead investors. So they've fallen behind. So while there are penalties, if they aren't applied quickly, that can lose effect as a tool. Okay? Does that make sense? Right? Like think of if any of you are parents and you've seen your parents do it, obviously, you know, you say, well, if you do that, that's it, you're grounded for 6 months. Well, and it never happens. It loses its effect. I tried that. I tried that in my younger age when my kids were small. Okay, so.
I think of speed limits.
Oh, speed limits actually is an excellent.
On the Henday, they lose effect overpass to overpass.
Oh my gosh, that's yes, if they're never enforced, it ceases to be a deterrent.
Yeah, I so many of my friends will speed up until an overpass is coming, and they know they might have a speed trap hiding on that overpass. They slow down for the overpass and then speed up again.
Oh my gosh, that's a perfect example. Yeah, exactly. Anything else you guys thought of? Okay, so non-cooperative game. So continuing with the managers versus investors. So one of the things that can keep a manager honest is they can gain a positive reputation that's going to encourage investment. Okay, if investors see that these statements are always clear and transparent, and when bad news comes out, it's relayed very quickly, and that kind of thing, they're going to start seeing that company as a trustworthy company, and so are more likely to invest. However, where there's an economic consequence, so it'll have an effect on share price, management may limit disclosure. So that's one of the limits on this. So as accountants, because remember, I'm trying to bring this back to accountants and the accounting field. When we go to get management support for new accounting standard, okay, we're going to change this accounting standard. You need to understand the trade-offs that especially management who's putting these into place are going to make so that you can argue and get management support. Okay, So that's talking about a manager. And now I'm going to look at agency theory. So this was overall how managers and investors, how they don't get to the best equilibrium. Maybe we have to put something in place to get where at least they're both getting better utilities. Now we're going to look at agency theory specifically and the owner-manager contract. So an owner can't watch a manager or doesn't watch a manager. We'll talk about that one. So the owner and the manager have an employment contract. It's a cooperative game because there's something binding to encourage. Appropriate behavior. Now, the manager has the choice of working hard or shirking. And that goes back to the moral hazard problems. And that's way back. So one party can see the actions, but not the other. So we're going to go through example 9.1, and here's the calculation part on page 363. So the manager's got the choice of working hard or shirking. And don't forget, when I talk about shirking just means not doing a good job. This can be in a lot of areas. So remember, it can be long-term planning. Getting a successor ready. Care the manager puts into the firm. Motivational skill of the manager. So all of these things are part of working hard or shirking. And shirking means doing less, working hard, of course, means doing more. Both the owner and manager want to maximize their utilities. Okay. So I'm just going to go back out to Word. Just going to start another page. Okay, and we're going to do example 9.1. Now I'll summarize it so you can see the whole picture. Or you can look in your text and follow along there if you want. So what we have is one owner and one manager. The owner is going to be the principal. Manager is going to be the agent. Now, generally, we consider owners risk neutral. And managers are generally more risk averse. Obviously, it's expected, guys. And in this scenario, sorry, guys. I don't know why that keeps popping up. We're going to have a single period contract. I don't know why that is doing that. Single period contract. And the owner is not going to operate the firm. The manager is, and they're paid at the end of the year. Now, there's two states. Just trying to change my pen color. So there's two states. Good times. Bad times. The payoff, which is going to be X1, is either going to be 100 or X2 is going to be 55. And by payoff, we mean cash flows resulting from manager's activity. And of course, the owner wants to maximize the payoff. Less management compensation, because you've got to pay the manager. So, the manager can A1 work hard and A2 sure. So not work hard, not do all the planning they should do, not train the teams, do all that kind of stuff, provide good leadership. So the probability of the high payoff, given that the manager works hard. I'll just write that down because it's been a while since we talked about that. Payoff probability of high payoff. I don't know why this keeps going. Probability high payoff if management has worked hard equals 0.6. And the probability of a low payoff, given that management has worked hard, is going to be 0.4. So the questions are all going to be like this. The probabilities and the payoffs are going to be different. So I have a question for you. If the manager or the management team works hard, how come the high payoff isn't 100%? Why is it only 6.6 instead of 1? They worked hard, shouldn't they get the high payoff for the business? Well, were there any managers that worked hard during COVID that didn't get a high payoff? Yes, definitely, because the economy is going to affect it as well, not just how hard they work. So for managers, there are many attributes that are out of their hands. Okay. The other thing could be there's a time lag. So why not 100% here? Economy, factors. Maybe they worked hard. This is a pharmaceutical company at R&D. Well, except for the COVID vaccine, which went through an amazing amount of time. Most vaccines and drugs and so on take years in development. I mean, luckily for COVID, they built it on mRNA, which they've been working on that for years. But, so they could be working like crazy, and the payoff might not come now. The payoff might come later. So, time lags, research and development is one of the things. Or maybe you just put a new product out. Well, are you going to suddenly get all your sales? No, they're going to build over time. Okay, so that's the working hard section. So now we're going to have the probability. Oh my God, you guys, this right here should have been X2. The manager works hard, they're going to get a crappy payoff. 0.4. Notice these both add up to 1. So just make sure that's an X2. Okay, so probability of a high payoff given the manager's slacks off. Do you think it's going to be higher or lower than 0.6? Well, probably lower unless something's going horribly wrong. And I just pulled these numbers from the example. And that means the probability of X2 given the manager shirking. So the manager is doing nothing. What's the chance they're going to get a low payoff? Well, it's going to be higher. Because they have to add to 1. Does that make sense? Okay, so what I want to do now is this kind of sets the scenario for what will happen when the owner is just owning and the manager is just managing. They can either work hard or they can do less or shirk. And here's the probability of the payoffs. Now, again, these are going to vary. In COVID times, this was probably a lot lower and this was a lot higher. The 0.04 would have been a lot higher in COVID times. In normal times, it's probably more like this. Depending on the industry, this 0.6 could be much higher, and this then would be much lower. So it depends on the industry as well. Okay, and things can suddenly change, like with the new Dreamliner that we built. And there were issues with it, right? Well, these probabilities would change very drastically. Don't recall, I don't think it was manager shirking or gross negligence. Might not even have finished with the transportation safety report yet, but the industry is going to affect it. Okay. Yeah, for example, you were a little happy bookstore. This is before Chapters came in. You were doing fine, and Chapters moved across the street from you. These numbers changed drastically. It has nothing to do with how hard manager works. Does that all kind of make sense, you guys? Because it's setting the stage for how much do you have to pay a manager to get a good utility for the owner and still keep the manager employed. Okay, so what I want to do, calculate owners and managers utilities. So that's the setup, everything behind the scenes. Now we're going to calculate the utilities. Does anyone still need this? Doesn't matter, I accidentally hit some button that made it go away. Okay, let's go on and do the utilities then. So first we're going to do so with the owner's utility, I'm so sorry about this, jumping up and down. With the owner's utility, the owner has decided the manager will receive $25 fixed salary. The other thing is the owner, we said, is risk neutral. So the payoff equals the utility. And don't forget the payoff is going to be dollars coming in minus manager's salary. Okay. So we're going to do the utility of the owner under A1. You know, I practiced writing with this last night so that it would work. And I don't know what happened. Okay. So the expected utility of the owner given A1. And if we remember, A1 was where the manager worked hard. So we go back up here. And we look, there's a 60% chance they're going to get the high payoff of 100. So 0.6 times the high payoff of 100 except they don't get all of it. They have to take off the manager's salary of 25. So that's going to be that plus, remember we take the two sets of probabilities and they get 55 minus 25. So that's going to equal 57 utility. And notice the units are in dollars. And that because the owner is risk neutral. So then the expected utility of the owner, if the manager shirks, is going to be 0.4 times the higher one plus 0.6 times the lower one.
I can't quite remember what 55 was from again. That was the utility if the manager shirked overall.
The payoff would be bad times for 55.
Okay, right. So it's basically like expected income of the firm.
Yes, expected income. That's the overall cash flows. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, so this one had the opposite effect. So it's going to be 0.4. So it's writing. Just give me a sec. Just type it. Sorry, guys, I'm going to type in 0.4. Sorry, you guys. Have a drink of coffee or something. I try and figure out why this is not working.
Are you in the header? Looks like you're in the header of the document. Yeah, you're in the footer there. Are you trying to be?
No, I am not trying to be. Thank you. Let me just get out of there. Okay, 0.4. Thank you very much, Isaac. So 0.4 times the high payout minus the manager's salary, because we've already got to take that into consideration. That's 0.6 times the 55, the bad times amount, minus the 25. And that equals $48. And again, this isn't units of happiness. This is actual dollars because the owner is risk neutral. So which does the owner want? A1 or A2? A1 is the manager working hard. A2 is the manager shirking.
A1 with the higher utility.
A1, exactly. A1 because higher utility. $57 is greater than $48. Now, for the owner, this is the first best choice. They carry all the risk. So they don't share it. Even if it's good times, they get it all. It's bad times, so they take a risk with that. Okay, does that make sense? So that's the owner's side of it. And it's logical, you guys. We just gave you an example with values so you can understand how it will play out. And because the manager one needs more information. So what I want to do now is look at the manager utility. Now, there's pieces about the manager we need to know. Generally, they're risk averse, more risk averse. Again, it's a spectrum. Prefer the sure thing to an iffy choice. Their salary is $25 per year. Pretend there's lots of zeros on it. Now, there's a reservation utility. And basically it means any job has to meet or beat that utility for them to take it. So the compensation for the manager must be large enough that the manager's expected utility is greater than reservation utility. So thinking of this in a more concrete way, up until COVID, many businesses assumed workers, especially when you're looking at minimum wage, their reservation utility was zero. They would take a job if they needed it, no matter what. What they're finding out now, with so many people opting to whether it's take unemployment or live on their savings, or many are starting their own businesses, they're finding that there actually is a reservation utility. Just because they don't have a job isn't enough for them to go into wherever, Walmart or whoever, Amazon, and go, yeah, I'll take it. You know what? I need a job. So they're actually finding the reservation utility is higher than what they originally expected, and they're finding a huge shortage of workers, especially in the states where minimum wages aren't mandated as well or are much lower. And same with the working conditions, they can be fired at will, that kind of thing. It's a very different situation than Canada. So there is a reservation utility. I can't spell. It says utility. That most people have. So for this, oh, okay, the other thing. Managers are effort averse. Management dislikes effort. This effort they have to put in going to work or disutility reduces overall managers' utility. So for this example, reservation utility is 3. So at least one of the choices must be 3 or greater, or a manager won't take the job. Now, I do want to point something out here. They dislike effort. That doesn't mean they just don't want to do anything. It means putting in effort at work costs them some utility. Now, obviously, generally for a good job that you kind of enjoy, or being around people, that kind of thing, the effort, some of it doesn't reduce your utility, right? Like if you won the lottery tomorrow, would you keep working or keep going to school to get a job? What do you think?
I probably would. Maybe not as hard, but
Right, you could take your time, maybe study something different. I asked this once to a class and 5 people said, do we have to still take accounting if we go to school? I thought, oh no, that's so sad. But it makes sense when you're in the middle of a hard program. So it's just an understanding that, yeah, of course, more effort takes away from your utility. And another thing that came up in the pandemic is working from home. And especially in places, Toronto, Vancouver, all the big cities where people are commuting up to 2 hours one way to get to work. That's a huge amount of disutility. So when they're working from home, all of a sudden that decreased. So they were getting more utility out of their jobs or happiness, right? So I think, if anything, the pandemic has given companies a lot more to think about, and they have to consider very carefully what they're offering workers in order to maintain a constant workforce. Anyway, that's just an aside. Let's go on with our manager. So they're getting $25 per year, as we saw in the other thing. They have a reservation utility of 3. So they have to get at least 3 or they're not taking the job. And the disutility for working hard is 2. And for A2 is 1.71. So this is saying, oh, I have to work hard. That takes away from some of my happiness. Here I'm shirking, but it doesn't take all of it. It doesn't give me, it's not 0, because I still have to come into work. Then I have to look busy, all that kind of stuff, right? So this usually isn't zero. Even though you're thinking you're shirking, you're not doing anything, but you have to be there, or you have to go to a meeting, or whatever. So that's the disutilities. Again, loss of utility from working. And we're going to put manager's utility is going to be the square root of their remuneration, or in this case, salary, minus the disutility. Okay. So the expected utility for the manager at A1, well, if he works hard, 60% for the high payoff. And how much is he going to get? Remuneration is 25 plus 0.4 of 25 minus the disutility of working hard. So that gives us 3 units of happiness. Because remember, we said managers were risk averse. When they're risk averse, wow, that's supposed to say remuneration. When they're risk averse, we can't just use the dollars like we could for the owner. It's some kind of, it'll tell you either something squared or something divided by 3 or square root, something like that. And then minus the disutility. Or if you're good at math, you guys, once you have the same payoff, you just take square root of 25 minus 2 equals 3. Now let's do the expected utility of the manager if they're shirking. So 0.4 times square root of 25 plus 0.6 times square root 25, except this time it's minus 1.71. So that gives 3.29. I just want to get this finished. And it's units of happiness. And again, or so there's 2 questions for the management. You always have to ask in these questions. One, will she take the job? Will she or he work hard or shirk? So first of all, do you think they're going to take the job? What was their reservation utility? 3,
so,
right?
yeah, they'll take the job.
Yeah, they'll take the job, right? They're either, is there 3 or 3.29? So the answer is yes. One option is greater than or equal to 3. So we're good. We know if she's going to take the job. But now the question is she going to work hard or shirk?
Well, the utility's higher for shirking.
Exactly. So shirk, because 3.29. Oh my goodness. I don't even know how to erase in this little baby. There. 3.29 is greater than 3. Okay, does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Okay, and you guys are good? Okay, well, just let me know if it's not. Okay, so I want to go back. So what we've done here, we've looked at the owner's utility and the manager's utility. And the owner, we know what he wants the manager to do, work hard.
I got a few
Manager
more
base.
minutes I can stick around, but I do have another class in 10 minutes.
Thank you for telling me. Okay, I'll finish this. I'll just summarize this. Then you know what, you guys, I'll record the rest. And I'll just keep going. You can stay if you want, but if you have to go, that's fine. Okay? Okay, so
Hi.
hi.
I have a question regarding my grade for the annotated bibliography.
Yes.
I know our grade because my group mate told me, but I can't see it on my grade book.
Right, because only one person submitted, and for Blackboard, you would have had to be sorted into groups
Oh,
for it
oh,
to go to all
okay.
four. So just ask whoever submitted it to send it to you, and if you don't get it, just email me because I've got a copy of it and I'll send it to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, and then if you got any questions, just let me know.
No worries. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Actually, I also just remembered that my teacher moved our class to 2, so I can stick around.
Oh, okay. I mean, don't feel like you have to because I'm taking into your time. But
I'd rather be here for it live than have to find it in the video later.
okay. Okay, so we did the owner, the manager. We know the owner wants the manager to work hard, but given this compensation, the manager is actually going to shirk because it gives them higher utility. But at least they've made it to the point where the manager is taking the job. So what we're going to do is go back to PowerPoint.
I can't hear you if you're talking.
Is that better?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, thanks. Sorry about that. I must have hit mute. Okay, so the owner can put up with shirking, and often they do that in the early points of a contract with someone new, or if they're just, they've grown from a very small business to where they have to back off a little, they'll put up with it for a while and then change the contracts later. Now, to get the best reservation utility of 57, they could direct monitor the manager. That gives the first best contract. But trying to monitor a manager, especially upper level, who thinking is part of their job. If you had to watch their computer, watch what they're doing, go to every meeting, well, you might as well be doing it yourself. So it's difficult to implement. Now, indirect monitoring only works with moving support. So what that means is normally indirect monitoring would be you watch the payout. And if the payout's low, it's more likely they're shirking. But if you remember from the example we just did, the low payout was 55, whether they're working hard or not working hard. So that doesn't going to help. So the low payoff for this to work would have to have two different amounts for A1 and A2. So that way, one for A1, let's say it was 55, but A2 it was 40. You'd know immediately if the payoff was 40, it was probably because the manager was shirking. But that's hard, and also don't forget the economy affects those, so it becomes quite unwieldy. So other ways to control, and this is the stuff we see much more commonly, you can rent the company to the manager, okay? However, that means the owner has no risk because the rent's fixed, and the manager has all the risk. Well, since the manager is risk averse, they are not going to like that. And the owner, who's risk neutral, all of a sudden doesn't have any risk. They're not happy either. So in particular, the manager may bear too much risk and the agency cost is too high. That's really the contractor cost. Because if you're the manager and you're risk averse, and all of a sudden the owner comes and says, you know what, you're going to have all the risk. Well, remember, just like with investors, higher risk, they want a higher payoff. So the manager will want a higher payoff. So this is one extreme. The manager has all the risk, the owner doesn't have any. In the example we did mathematically, the owner had all the risk and the manager didn't have any. So sharing the payoff is the one that we see most commonly. Compensate the manager based on a jointly observable performance measure, like net income. However, we run into problems. Net income may not be fully informative. E.g., a lot of R&D won't show up as increased net income. It could be for years. Okay. Now, you can look at example 9.2, and it's the second best contract, and the interests are now aligned. So what's happened in this example is the owner gives the manager a flat rate plus some of the net income, so a bonus. So that keeps the manager happy, the flat rate, because they're risk averse, they want some consistency. And then they give them some of the net income, so some of the bonus. Okay. Now, I mean, that could be like a commission scenario also. A lot of salespeople in general that are based on commission-only standards are much less risk averse, or they have the family and life situation where they can be. people that are more risk averse, they want some kind of security. And some only want that, they don't even care about the bonus. So it's all going to vary. Okay, any questions with that? Okay. So the problem is net income, because that's the best thing we have to measure the manager on. So if the recognition lag can be reduced, the payoff prediction should be more accurate. So if the manager works really hard on something and it'll show up in net income sooner rather than later, they'll be happier. And this one you can go over. These aren't going to be critical, more the understanding. Once you improve the precision of net income, then you get a more efficient contract. Because let's say net income is noisy. There's too much stuff mixed up in it. It doesn't measure R&D. The economy is really influential and so on. Then the percentage, percentage has to be high. But if NI reflects performance better, percentage can be lower. So that means the owner is giving less of the profits. So they want net income that reflects performance better. So that's our jobs as accountants, to eventually get net income as efficient as we can. Okay, now, given that they're now going to be measured on net income as management, they are likely to manage earnings. So they'll use pre-contract information. So info about net income before signing the contract or while negotiating. Pre-decision information. Get info about the payoff. After signing, but before deciding to work hard. Worry about that. Deciding on A1 or A2 for post-decision. So this is they've already decided to shirk or work hard. So they're actively managed. So, and again, you can just look through that example yourself. So given this, contracts can be designed to motivate honest disclosure. So if you look at this example, I'll just summarize it. It encourages manager not to inflate earnings because their bonus percentage increases as net income decreases. So an inverse relationship. So take a look through that example if you want to see the utilities that come out of it. They kind of start with our original example and then go through. The key thing is they're saying, don't just inflate your net income to get a higher bonus, because you're not going to. Of course, what does this do? It doesn't give the manager much pressure to increase net earnings naturally by working hard. So there's issues with that as well. Okay, if you're not asleep yet, Isaac, I'm going to keep going. Controlling earnings management. Okay, so earnings management, usually accrual-based type stuff. They can change accounts receivable, bad debts. They can change methods of amortization. They can change how many potential liabilities they record, that kind of thing. So GAAP can be used to control earnings by limiting the choices of managers. And again, there's an example you can go through. So there's fewer choices. It's harder to manage earnings. Of course, we know with IFRS, there's much more flexibility. But it also requires more disclosure. Okay, so the summary of the owner-manager issues is we can't observe the agent's effort. That's unwieldy. Otherwise, the owner might as well be doing the whole job themselves. The most efficient contract will depend on what is jointly observable by both parties. Compensation risk reduces the agent, the manager's expected utility because they're risk averse. But by putting some of the risk on them, they take on thinking more like an owner. So they will work more like an owner and be working harder, hopefully. When net income is a performance measure, the manager has a huge information advantage because the owner doesn't know until net income actually comes out what the net income is. So the manager has lots of time to try and manage earnings. Because they can see how the earnings is turning out and act accordingly. GAAP may be a way to reduce this advantage and motivate manager performance. It's mostly by limiting accounting choices. Now we're going to move agency theory, which is the two parties. One party can see what they're doing, the other can't. And we're going to change it to a lender management contract. So, lender lends the company money. The manager's choice is to pay high dividends or not. Because the manager does not have to act in the best interest of the lender. The lender must make a choice to lend money or make a safe investment. Obviously, the more risky, the higher the rate of interest. How could we fix this? Well, a lot of them, there's debt covenant. Measures such as dividends can't be higher than a certain percentage of retained earnings. So that would stop the manager being able to pay such high dividends. However, then, we still encourages managers to increase net income because that will increase retained earnings. Okay, so some implications then of agency theory for both lender manager and owner manager. Managers are concerned about incomplete rigid contracts. It's difficult to amend a contract, and one party may want compensation for a change in contract. For example, managers, CEOs, and stuff that are headed into COVID and their bonuses are based on net income. Well, the first few months they were probably not too worried, but as it kept going for a year and then 2 years, and now it's going to take time even for supply chains to catch up. Well, their rigid contracts that was set, for a 3-year contract, 5-year contract, whatever, isn't accurate anymore. It doesn't reflect reality or the change in reality. So it's difficult to amend it. And if they do want to amend it, then maybe the owners will say, well, we want compensation for a change in the contract. There's a penalty because you want to change your contract. So that's one of the problems. And the pandemic shows off a lot of this. So Holstrom suggests using more than one variable to evaluate management, for example, net income and share price. So your R&D may not show up in net income now, but should be reflected in share price. Right? When you make announcements, if you read them, a lot of, for example, drug companies will say, we've got this in the pipeline, we're starting this study, it's very promising, and it will be reflected in share price, but not in net income. So adding another measure is an excellent way to do it. So finally, kind of looking at the economic consequences, which was managers change earnings and policies which cause actual dollar changes. And how to tie that back to the efficient market hypothesis. So accounting policies do have consequences, even when there's no effect on cash flow, mostly because of incomplete rigid contracts, so then managers will kind of work around it. And that works also with lenders and managers as well. Something changes, like the pandemic, and their contract with their lender says your interest rate's going to go up if X. Well, if your earnings drop and they go, okay, we're increasing it, you don't have a lot of power, even though this was not in your control. So both the pandemic and the crash of 2007, 2008 pointed out a lot of these things. Anyway, I've kept you, half an hour too long. Agency theory explains how economic consequences can exist in an efficient market because the agent, what they do can't be monitored. So they can't be monitored. %100% of the time. So the owner, or principal, doesn't know what's happening. And management will adjust operations in response to new accounting policies which affect net income. Share prices then respond. So the questions for this chapter are these three, and it's primarily the quantitative. For qualitative questions, it'll pretty much be kind of what we've talked about. Like I might say, explain agency theory and give an example, something like that. Okay, that was it for chapter 9. Do you have any questions, Isaac?
Well, I don't.